I hate filming in bug season.
This is insane.
Do you think you know Les Stroud beyond the highlight reels? Think again. The show gave you the wilderness challenges, ingenious shelters, and survival triumphs, but not the price paid off camera. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Les Stroud in the world of Survivorman. What the edits skipped, what the brand smoothed over, and the choices that changed everything. Let's find out what Les Stroud didn't want you to know, and why he kept it quiet. Stay tuned. Before Les Stroud became the iconic Survivorman, carrying cameras into the wilderness alone, he was just a boy from Mimico, Ontario, with an insatiable curiosity about the natural world. Growing up in the 1960s and 70s near the shores of Lake Ontario, young Les found himself drawn to the outdoors from an early age. His childhood wasn't spent in remote wilderness. It was firmly suburban, but weekend camping trips ignited a passion that would define his life's work. Unlike many survival experts who came from military backgrounds, Stroud's path was distinctly different. After attending high school, he pursued studies in music and worked as a songwriter and musician. Yes, before he was teaching millions how to find food in the wild, he was playing in a David Bowie tribute band and writing commercial jingles. It was this background in music and production that would later give him a unique advantage in documenting his own adventures. The pivotal moment came in the early 1990s. Stroud and his then-girlfriend, later wife Sue, decided to test their mettle with a year-long self-sufficient adventure in the remote Canadian wilderness. Picture this: a crisp fall morning in the boreal forest, the smell of pine thick in the air, their hands calloused from building their own log cabin, waking up to the realization that every drop of water, every morsel of food depended entirely on their own ingenuity and effort. This wasn't a television production with safety nets. It was real survival. They made their own shelter, foraged their own food, and lived off the land in a way few modern humans ever experience. When they emerged from this self-imposed challenge, Stroud wasn't just changed, he was reborn with purpose and a skill set few possessed in the modern world. But how does someone go from living in the woods to becoming a television survival icon? And what parts of that transition would he later wish had stayed off camera? Les Stroud's entry into television wasn't the typical Hollywood casting call story. After his year in the wilderness, he established himself as an outdoor adventure guide and survival instructor in Ontario. But Stroud had something many outdoor experts lacked: a background in music production and a keen eye for storytelling. In the late 1990s, he began pitching a different kind of survival show. While networks were accustomed to host and crew productions, Stroud proposed something radical. He would survive alone and film everything himself. No camera crew, no production, assistants, just one man, his equipment, and the wilderness. Networks balked initially. The concept seemed too risky, too different, and frankly, too real for television executives used to more controlled environments. Undeterred, Stroud produced 2 one-hour pilots called Stranded for Discovery Canada, lugging over 50 pounds of camera gear into the wilderness himself. The result was raw, authentic, and unlike anything television had seen before. Viewers connected immediately with Stroud's vulnerable, honest approach to survival, watching him struggle, make mistakes, and problem solve in real time. When Survivorman officially launched in 2004, it struck a chord with audiences tired of overproduced reality television. Stroud wasn't just surviving, he was democratizing survival knowledge while pioneering a new filmmaking approach. His genuine expertise, combined with the physical toll of filming himself, created a viewing experience that felt immediate and honest. But as viewers fell in love with the rugged authenticity of Survivorman, what compromises and challenges were happening behind Stroud's camera lens that we never got to see? Here's the thing about Survivorman that made it revolutionary. Les Stroud really was alone out there. Unlike other survival shows that emerged later with hidden production teams and stage scenarios, Stroud legitimately carried all his camera equipment, set up every shot, broke down every shot, and genuinely survived while documenting the experience. But that doesn't mean everything you saw was completely unfiltered reality. Television requires structure, and even the most authentic show needs parameters. For each episode, Stroud would typically spend 7 days in a survival scenario, but this would be edited down to a 1-hour episode, meaning approximately 168 hours of experience condensed into 42 minutes of television content. This editing process necessarily removed much of the mundane reality of survival. Hours spent maintaining fire, repeated failed attempts at certain techniques, and the psychological burden of isolation. Editors selected moments of highest drama, educational value, or visual impact. One former crew member reportedly noted, "For every shelter you see Les successfully build, there might have been 2 partial failures that never made the final cut." The show's format also required certain television conventions. Stroud had to plan his camera moves in advance, considering angles, lighting, and narrative progression, all while actually surviving. Imagine trying to film a dramatic climbing sequence when you're genuinely exhausted and at risk. Some scenes required multiple takes, meaning Stroud might need to repeat a physically demanding task solely for filming purposes. There were also predetermined safety zones established before filming, and Stroud carried emergency communication devices. The show never hid this fact. Stroud occasionally mentioned his emergency radio on air, but the editing necessarily emphasized isolation over safety protocols. Production teams would be stationed miles away, ready to intervene in life-threatening emergencies, though Stroud prided himself on never having called for emergency extraction during filming. Perhaps most taxing was the dual cognitive burden Stroud faced every minute of filming, simultaneously thinking as both a survivor, finding water, building shelter, procuring food, and as a filmmaker, considering shot composition, narrative progression, technical requirements. This mental load was rarely explicitly addressed in the show itself. But if the filming conditions were this challenging, why did Stroud push himself through multiple seasons? And what aspects of the production machinery remain entirely invisible to viewers? Behind every seemingly isolated adventure in Survivorman stood a complex production infrastructure that viewers never saw. Before Stroud ever stepped foot in a location, researchers and production teams would scout multiple potential filming areas, conduct environmental assessments, secure filming permits, and coordinate with local authorities. Legal requirements vary dramatically by location. In the United States, for instance, national parks typically prohibit survival activities like foraging or hunting, meaning locations often had to be on private land or in areas with specific usage permissions. In international locations, diplomatic clearances sometimes came into play alongside standard permits. Here's a little discussed reality. Each location had a mandatory risk assessment. This included evaluating dangerous wildlife presence, weather pattern analysis, water source verification, and evacuation route planning. While Stroud genuinely faced survival challenges, the production company had an ethical and legal obligation to mitigate truly life-threatening scenarios. The gear equation was another carefully balanced element. Stroud typically entered each scenario with minimal survival tools appropriate to the scenario's premise. Plane crash, lost hiker, stranded motorist, etc. But he always carried significantly more production equipment, multiple cameras, batteries, lenses, and audio recording devices. At its peak, this equipment could weigh over 50 pounds, a physical burden rarely acknowledged explicitly on screen, but one that dramatically increased the survival challenge. Then there was the matter of timing and seasonality. Episodes weren't filmed in the order they aired, but rather grouped logistically by region and season, then assembled into a broadcast schedule that might differ substantially from the production timeline. An episode set in winter might occasionally use footage from multiple winter excursions combined into a single narrative. But how did carrying all this equipment and navigating these production realities affect Stroud's body and mind over time? What was the true cost of being both survivor and storyteller? The physical demands of Survivorman went far beyond what viewers witnessed on screen. Les Stroud wasn't just surviving in challenging environments. He was doing so while carrying cameras, setting up shots, and maintaining a narrative through his exhaustion. This double burden created a unique kind of strain few could comprehend. Night falls in the Amazon rainforest. The humidity hangs like a wet blanket, condensation dripping from leaves overhead. Stroud hasn't eaten properly in days. His hands tremble slightly as he adjusts the camera for a time-lapse shot that will show his night in the jungle shelter. He needs to position it, start recording, then hike back to his shelter, all in near total darkness through terrain crawling with venomous creatures. The mental calculation is constant. Conserve battery power for tomorrow's key shots, or document this moment now. Sleep deprivation became Stroud's constant companion. In a 2013 interview, he admitted that he rarely got more than 3-4 hours of broken sleep during filming. The reasons were multiple: the discomfort of improvised shelters, the vigilance required in predator territories, and the fundamental anxiety of true isolation. But uniquely to his situation, he also needed to maintain and protect his camera equipment overnight, often keeping batteries warm inside his clothing to preserve their charge in cold environments. The physical toll accumulated across seasons. Stroud suffered numerous injuries that viewers only glimpsed portions of: persistent back problems from carrying equipment, intestinal issues from questionable water sources, foot injuries, and extreme weight loss. During a 10-day shoot in Norway, he reportedly lost 20 pounds, an unsustainable rate that illustrates the very real caloric deficit he operated under. Perhaps most significantly, Stroud faced the psychological challenge of true solitude, combined with the pressure to produce compelling television. Unlike other survival experts on television who could vent frustrations to a camera crew or share the mental load with a production team, Stroud bore his struggles entirely alone. The isolation created a psychological weight that eventually contributed to his decision to end the original series. In a particularly harrowing Arctic episode, Stroud faced a polar bear encounter that later he described as one of the most terrifying moments of his career. What viewers didn't see was the hours afterward, alone in a makeshift shelter, adrenaline crashing, trying to simultaneously process the near-death experience while deciding how to film and frame it for the show. But if the personal cost was so high, how did this affect his relationships with those closest to him? What happened to Les Stroud, the person, when Survivorman became a global brand? The original Survivorman series coincided with significant personal transitions in Stroud's life that remained largely off-camera. During the early seasons, Stroud was married to Sue Jamison, who had shared his year-long wilderness experience before the show. However, as the series progressed and his travel schedule intensified, their relationship faced challenges that ultimately led to their divorce around 2008. In rare interviews, Stroud has acknowledged that the demands of the show, sometimes requiring him to be away filming for weeks at a time, followed by intensive editing and production work, created inevitable strains on his family life. He has 2 children, and the balance between being Survivorman and being present as a father presented conflicts that never made it to air. There's a particular poignancy to Stroud's situation that differs from many television personalities. The very isolation that made his show compelling meant that, unlike hosts who traveled with crews, he couldn't bring family to locations during filming. Each episode represented complete separation from his support system. The inner circle of production professionals who worked with Stroud off-camera, editors, producers, network executives, witnessed a different side of the survival expert. While maintaining his authenticity and commitment to the concept, Stroud reportedly had to fight numerous battles over creative control. His vision for pure educational content occasionally clashed with network pressure for more drama and sensationalism. One production associate reportedly noted that Stroud would sometimes refuse to play up dangers for dramatic effect, an integrity that cost him in negotiations but maintained the show's educational core. This behind-the-scenes insistence on authenticity rarely received public acknowledgement, but shaped the show's unique position in the reality television landscape. The question emerges: how did Stroud balance the growing Survivorman brand with his personal values? And what happened when commercial interests began to reshape his original vision? As Survivorman gained international popularity, Les Stroud transitioned from survival educator to global brand. This transformation created both opportunities and tensions that remained largely invisible to viewers. By the peak of the show's popularity, Stroud had developed multiple revenue streams: the television series itself, instructional DVDs, books including Survive and Will to Live, a line of Survivorman branded knives and tools, speaking engagements, and survival training courses. The business infrastructure required to manage these ventures grew substantially from the one-man band operation that had launched the original show. But here's where it gets complicated. The commercialization of survival knowledge created philosophical tensions for someone who had initially entered the field from a place of personal passion rather than profit motive. In unguarded moments during later interviews, Stroud occasionally hinted at the challenge of maintaining authenticity while satisfying stakeholders in the growing Survivorman enterprise. The survival television landscape also changed dramatically during Stroud's tenure. When Survivorman debuted, it stood relatively alone in its field. By the time later seasons aired, numerous competitors had emerged, many with significantly larger production budgets and more dramatic premises, though often with questionable authenticity. These shows created market pressure for more sensational content that ran counter to Stroud's documentary approach. Network relationships revealed another hidden tension. Despite the show's popularity, Stroud reportedly engaged in difficult negotiations with Discovery over budgets, creative control, and ownership of the Survivorman concept. These business conflicts never appeared on screen, but shaped the show's evolution and Stroud's relationship with television as a medium. So what happened when these accumulated pressures, physical, psychological, personal, and commercial, finally reached a breaking point? In 2008, after 4 seasons of pushing his body and mind to their limits, Les Stroud made a shocking announcement. Survivorman would end. For viewers who had come to rely on Stroud's authentic wilderness guidance, the news came as a surprise. The show was at its peak popularity. Why walk away? The reality, which Stroud would later discuss more openly, involved a perfect storm of factors that converged around this time. The physical toll had become unsustainable. Years of carrying heavy camera equipment through extreme environments had left Stroud with persistent back problems and other health issues. During one particularly grueling shoot in Papua New Guinea, Stroud contracted a severe intestinal parasite that left him ill for months afterward, a health crisis that never made it to air, but significantly impacted his decision-making. There was also the personal dimension. His marriage had ended, and the constant travel and isolation of filming had affected his relationship with his children. Associates close to the production reported that Stroud had begun questioning whether the sacrifice was worth the outcome, particularly as networks pushed for more dramatic, less educational content. Then there was a specific incident that many believe served as the final catalyst. During filming in Norway, Stroud experienced particularly harsh conditions that resulted in severe weight loss and exhaustion beyond what was visible in the edited episode. In later interviews, he hinted that this experience brought him uncomfortably close to his physical limits, creating a moment of clarity about the sustainability of his one-man production model. The morning after that Norway shoot wrapped, Stroud sat alone at a small table in his hotel room. The cameras were finally off. His hands trembled slightly as he sipped hot coffee, the first warm comfort after days of deprivation. In that moment, staring at his gaunt reflection in the window, he reportedly made the decision that would shock fans. It was time to step back from the punishing schedule of Survivorman. When the announcement came, the public explanation focused on creative reasons. Stroud had proven his concept and was ready for new challenges. The physical toll, family considerations, and creative tensions remained largely private. But the question lingered: how would fans in the survival entertainment industry respond to the absence of the genre's pioneer? The announcement of Survivorman's end generated waves through both fan communities and the television industry. Online forums filled with theories. Was Stroud truly stepping away by choice? Had network conflicts forced his hand? Was his health compromised? The vacuum of detailed information allowed speculation to flourish. Industry insiders recognized the significance differently. Survivorman had fundamentally changed outdoor television, establishing a new standard for authenticity that put pressure on other productions. Numerous survival shows that emerged in Survivorman's wake, Bear Grylls' Man vs. Wild being the most prominent, faced increased scrutiny about their production methods and staging of scenarios, directly resulting from the comparison to Stroud's transparent approach. Stroud himself entered a period of reinvention. He focused on music, releasing albums that reflected his environmental ethos. He produced independent films about wilderness and indigenous knowledge. He expanded his wilderness school and speaking engagements. These projects received substantially less public attention than Survivorman, but represented a reclaiming of creative control. What surprised many was the show's resilience in Stroud's absence. Reruns continued drawing viewers, YouTube clips accumulated millions of views, and the Survivorman approach maintained a dedicated following that rejected more sensationalistic survival content. This ongoing connection with audiences ultimately contributed to an unexpected development in 2012. Stroud's decision to revive the series in a modified format. The revived Survivorman featured shorter filming periods, 5 days rather than 7, more focused scenarios, and a production approach that made modest concessions to Stroud's physical well-being while maintaining the solo filming concept. This evolution revealed something Stroud had rarely discussed directly. The original format had indeed been unsustainable as initially conceived. But even with these modifications, what fundamental aspects of survival television and Stroud's experiences within it remained hidden from viewers? The greatest paradox of Survivorman was that a show built on authenticity and transparency still necessarily kept certain realities hidden, not through deliberate deception, but through the inherent limitations of the television medium and the demands of responsible production. Perhaps most significant was the full extent of preparation behind each episode. While Stroud was open about having safety protocols, the show rarely detailed the weeks of research, location scouting, and contingency planning that preceded each filming. This wasn't just television preparation, it was a crucial survival lesson in itself. True wilderness survival experts spend far more time on prevention and preparation than on emergency techniques. Yet this aspect remained underemphasized for dramatic purposes. Then there were the technological compromises. As camera technology evolved over Survivorman's run, equipment became smaller and more energy efficient, actually making Stroud's task somewhat easier in later seasons. This evolution was rarely acknowledged on screen, but represented a significant change in his physical burden. The editing process necessarily removed hundreds of hours of crucial survival reality. The tedium of maintaining shelter and fire, the emotional swings of isolation, the physical discomfort that cannot be fully conveyed through a screen. Stroud has noted in interviews that the psychological aspects of survival, particularly the effects of extended solitude, were among the most difficult elements to translate into television content. Legal and ethical constraints created other hidden boundaries. Survivorman never showed certain potentially useful survival techniques that might be dangerous if attempted by unskilled viewers. Similarly, in many filming locations, true living off the land was legally restricted, creating limitations that were only occasionally addressed directly in the show. Perhaps most poignantly, what remained largely off-camera was Stroud's personal evolution throughout the series, how the experiences changed his relationship with nature, technology, indigenous knowledge, and modern society. While viewers saw his physical challenges, the deeper philosophical journey remained largely private, emerging more fully in his post-Survivorman projects. But with all these hidden dimensions now more visible, what is Les Stroud's true legacy in television and survival education? 2 decades after Survivorman first appeared on television screens, Les Stroud's influence extends far beyond entertainment. He didn't just create a show, he fundamentally changed how survival skills are taught and how outdoor television is produced. Stroud's insistence on authenticity created a watershed in reality television, establishing a new standard that forced producers and viewers alike to question staged scenarios and artificial drama. Every survival show that followed had to position itself in relation to Survivorman's benchmark of transparency. Some embraced its documentary approach. Others explicitly rejected it for more dramatic formats. But none could ignore the paradigm Stroud established. Beyond television technique, Stroud democratized survival knowledge in an unprecedented way. Before Survivorman, wilderness skills were often taught through specialized courses, military training, or traditional knowledge passed through generations. By bringing these techniques into millions of homes, Stroud created a new generation of outdoor enthusiasts who approach nature with both respect and practical knowledge. Perhaps most significantly, Stroud's later work revealed what may have been his true purpose all along. As he pivoted toward environmental documentaries, indigenous knowledge preservation, and climate advocacy, It became clear that survival skills were just one component of a larger philosophy: human interconnection with the natural world. The skills of fire making and shelter building served as gateways to a deeper environmental consciousness. Today, Les Stroud continues evolving beyond the Survivorman identity that made him famous. His work with indigenous communities, environmental projects, and music reflects a journey from survival expert to environmental elder. A transition largely invisible during the show's original run, but clearly germinating throughout those solo wilderness experiences. Picture him now, standing at the edge of a northern forest, camera in hand not for broadcast but for personal documentation. The technological burden lifted, the production pressures absent. Just a man who has spent more time alone in diverse wilderness settings than almost anyone in the modern world, still drawn to the places where humans must confront their place in nature directly. The survival challenges may be less intense now, but the connection remains unbroken. What remains when the cameras are truly off? Perhaps just the essential truth that Survivormen always aim to convey beneath its entertainment value. Our dependence on natural systems we barely understand, our forgotten resilience, and our responsibility to the wilderness that remains. If this deep dive gave you a different perspective on Les Stroud and Survivorman, tap like, share it with a friend, and hit subscribe. What survival technique from Stroud has stuck with you the most over the years? And which survival show personality should we explore next? Your thoughts matter in this community of people fascinated by the thin line between wilderness TV and wilderness reality.